Okay, good evening all. So as Mario said, we are going to look at EBVs today and just delve into what goes into an EBV and how can we use EBVs to select our animals. You will see that we will, in certain aspects, we will just touch tonight as we will delve into it deeper in courses that we will be giving during the course of the year. So let's start with that. So what is an estimated breeding value? And I'm quickly going to give some definitions and some facts about it, and then we will discuss it a bit further. So the first thing is an estimated breeding value is an animal's genetic merit or value as a parent. So it gives you information on how an animal's progeny is going to perform in a specific trait. And I just want to quickly mention something here. It's very important that you realize it doesn't give you information on how the animal is going to perform itself, but how his progeny is going to perform. So keep that in the back of your mind. It is only an estimate. So we use the information collected by the breeders to estimate the breeding value of a specific animal. The exact breeding value will never be known. But as we collect more information, the EBV becomes more accurate and we get closer to the exact breeding value. But it will change over an animal's lifetime. It's not a constant. So if an animal has an EBV of plus 16, for example, for weaning weight, it's not going to stay plus 16. Next month, when there's lots of progeny information going into the system, being analyzed, that EBV might change. But as you will see, it becomes more accurate. So it is expressed as the difference between an individual animal's genetics and the genetic base to which the animal is compared. And we'll discuss this in a bit more detail later on. It is reported in the units in which the measurement is taken. So for example, for the weight traits, we express the EBV in kilogram. For scrotal circumference, we will use centimeters. Days to calving will be days, etc. On average, half of this difference will be passed on to the animal's progeny. And we will discuss this also in a bit more detail later on. So what you will realize is that we've been talking about genetics a lot. And we will discuss how we get to the genetics part later on. So if you have an animal and you weigh it, for example, 400-day weight, you have the measurement. We call it the phenotype. So what you see or what you measure is the phenotype of the animal. That phenotype is made up of the genetic ability of that animal to perform in the specific trait, for example, 400-day weight, and the non-genetic factors or environmental factors that play a role in the expression of the trait. So if we focus on this weight again, if the animal weighed 420 kilogram at 400-day weight, what portion is the genetics? What portion is the feed, the felt quality, the extra feeding that the animal received before you weighed that animal? what portion is, or if the animal was weighed for 400-day weight, at what specific age was he weighed. For breed plan, we can submit 400-day weights between the age of 301 days up until 500 days of age. So at what age did we physically weigh this animal? The sex of the animal, steers or bulls will weigh more than the heifers. The lifetime feeding regime of that animal, did he receive good quality feed throughout his life, or did he go through droughts, etc., etc. That will affect his performance in some of the traits. So there's a number of things that go into that weight of the animal. But we want to focus on the genetic ability. So how do we get to that? So before we look further into EBVs, I just want to show you a picture of a bodybuilder. So if you can just think what went into this bodybuilder to get him to this position in his life, or this physique. There's hours of training. There's probably some USN or other product that he used. There's genetic ability to form muscle mass, etc. But there's lots of things that went into this guy to get to this point. If we look at or think that this guy will have some kids, will he pass all that we see now onto his offspring? And the simple answer is no. He can only pass on his genetic ability, and then his son will need to train hours and hours, etc., to get to his physique. And we need to keep that in mind with our cattle as well. That's what we see at the sale pen. What went into that animal? And that's not what you see is not necessarily going to be carried over to the offspring. So if we again look at this equation, we want to exclude all the environmental or non-genetic effects that had an influence on the performance of the animal and identify the genetic ability of that animal. So how do we do that? This is where breed plan and estimated breeding values come into play. So I want to give you another example here. If I ask you, what is the average rainfall on your farm? You can only answer me if you've been keeping records of your daily, monthly, annual rainfall, hundreds and thousands of data points that you use to calculate the averages per month, per year, etc. And then you can give me a fairly accurate indication of your average rainfall. And as we know, some years will be less, other years more, but you will have a good idea if you do accurate record keeping, what your average is and what's normally the minimum you can work on, or the maximum that you can work on. But you will have a good idea of the average. So similar to this, we have lots and lots of data points going into the calculation of EBVs that give us an accurate estimation of the EBVs of the animals that we work with. So there's different sources of information that goes into an EBV calculation. So when an animal is young and he has not had any progeny and has not been measured himself, we rely on the pedigree. So his dam and his sire, how did they perform within their contemporary groups and all the other related animals. So that makes up the biggest portion of the information we use when an animal is young. Then the animal is weighed or measured for the specific trait that we are interested in, and that also contributes to the animal's EBV. And then when an animal is used in your herd, there's some progeny, and when you get to about 10 or more progeny, their performance information becomes the biggest contributor to an animal's EBV. So what you will realize is that we need the performance information of the animal's pedigree animals, the animal itself, progeny, to get to the EBV. So without measurements, accurate EBVs cannot be calculated. So let's look at the simple calculation of an EBV. So we stick to our 400-day weight example, just because it's fairly easy to understand and describe. So the simple calculation is a specific animal's weight or other measurement minus the weight of the group, and we'll look into that group in a bit more detail, times the heritability. And we'll look into heritability a bit later on as well. So, for example, the animal weighed 380 kilograms at 400-day of age, and the group was 350 kilograms. That is 30 kilograms times the heritability, and that gives you an EBV of +9. So this is the simplest form of a EBV. So as was mentioned in the previous slide, we use all the data points on all related animals, the animal's performance itself, the progeny of the animal to get to his EBV. So this is just a small contributor to the animal's EBV. So let's look into heritability. So what's heritability? It's the portion of the phenotypic variation, so the variation we see or measure in the animal that is due to an animal's genetics and that will be passed on to the offspring. It varies from 0, so closer to 0, the environment has a big influence on the trait. Closer to 1, the genetics has a bigger influence on the trait. It's also expressed as a percentage. It's a population measure. What does that mean? So, for example, Brahman South Africa will have a heritability for 200-day weight. Then what is very important is that we need to have variation in the phenotype for the trait to be heritable. So to describe that, we have, if we measure the 200-day weight of 10 calves, we will have variation in that weight. If we look at the number of legs in those calves, there's still a genetic component to the number of legs, but all of them have 4 legs. So there's no variation in what we can measure. So number of legs is not heritable, but the weight of those calves are. So why is heritability important for us? It gives us, or it influences the rate of the genetic improvement or genetic gain that we can get when we select for the trait. So if a trait is medium to highly heritable, the genetic component has a bigger influence on the variation we see in the animals, and the environmental components has a lesser effect. So animals with high performance tend to produce high-performing offspring. And for these traits, we will be able to make faster genetic progress if we select for them. We'll look in the next slide at which traits are medium and highly heritable, etc. Low heritable trait, the genetic component is smaller and the environmental component is bigger. So the environment has a big influence on the expression of the specific trait. So the performance of the parents will reveal less about the progeny's performance. So when we select for these traits, the genetic progress tends to be slower, but it's still possible to make genetic progress. So if we look at the different traits, and I'm just going to bulk them together here, your reproductive traits is normally lowly to medium heritable, growth traits medium to highly heritable, and your carcass traits also medium to highly heritable. So it's easier to make genetic progress in your growth and carcass traits. The reproduction traits, we normally make slower genetic progress in. So how does breed plan exclude the environmental effects? They do that by only analyzing or comparing animals within contemporary groups. So if we, again, look at that simple calculation, that weight of the group, that's the contemporary group. So we only directly compare an individual's measurement to the group average. And this applies to all traits, from birth weight right through to carcass traits, net feed intake, everything. So we need to make sure, if we're stud breeders and we do collect performance data, that we keep those contemporary groups together, weigh them together, test them together so that we can get meaningful information out of it. I'm quickly going to say this before we start with the contemporary groups. If you remember, Mario had a slide on the genetic, the different topics we will cover in the talks. Contemporary groups is one of them. So I'm going to give a brief overview, but we will go into more detail later on this year. So what is a contemporary group? A contemporary group is a group of animals which had the same opportunity to perform. So remember, we want to identify the genetic differences between animals. So we need to make sure the animals that we compare had the same opportunity to perform. We cannot compare the physical weight of an animal in your herd to the animal in another herd, because their environments differ, the feeding that they receive differ, etc. And that will have an influence on the specific trait. So breed plan analyzes cattle within these contemporary groups to take out as many of the non-genetic or environmental effects as possible. So animals' performance is compared to the group average. The larger the contemporary groups, the more informative. So this just gives you an overview of how breed plan construct these contemporary groups. And as I mentioned, we will discuss them in more detail later on. But the first thing is they only look at your herd's animals. Animals born in a specific year, so 2025, the season. The season has also an influence. When the animals are born, will have an effect on their birth weight, their weaning weight, etc. So they keep the different seasons separate. The sex of the animal, bull calves and heifer calves are never compared directly. If you do have twins, they will be kept separate. If you do make use of embryo transfers, they will keep those ET calves separate as there is a recipient dam effect on the performance of that animal, the dam age. So, for example, first calvers, their calves will be analyzed separate. The weighed date, so only animals weighed or measured on the same date will be compared together. Then we have slice groups. We'll discuss this in more detail, but breed plan only analyze animals within a 45-day slice for birth weight and weaning weight. After that, they increase the size of the slice to 60 days, and that is to exclude the environmental effects or the seasonal effects. And lastly, they also look at the breeder-defined management groups. So breed plan does not know what happens on your farm on a day-to-day basis. So if you treat a subset of your calves differently from the rest of the group, so you creep feed as a portion of them, but the others not, for example, you will indicate that when you submit the weights and tell breed plan, these calves were treated differently, so keep them separate in the analysis. Or if there was severe illness for some of your animals, you will indicate that also with a contemporary group. So now let's look at a bull's progeny's performance within their birth weight contemporary groups. So if you keep in mind that simple calculation of an animal's weight minus the group weight, etc., we get to the progeny difference. So in this group, the specific bull's progeny weighed 7 kilograms less than the group average. In another contemporary group, his calves weighed 2 kilograms heavier than the group average. In the next one, 8 kilograms better than or heavier than the group average. In a fourth group, 4 kilograms heavier. -5, 0, so right on the group average. In this case, -10. And we can continue with all the different groups in which this animal has progeny. And then we can get to a sort of average performance of his progeny. So you will see in some of the groups, he performed better than the group average, on some of them on the group average, and in some of them below the group average. But on average, if we look at all his progeny in all their different contemporary groups, he weighed about 2.4 kilograms heavier than the group average. So this is just to show the information that goes into the calculation. And what you will see is there's hundreds of data points that eventually get you to a single value that's the EBV of the animal. So just to show an example, you have a cow with an EBV of +4, a bull with an EBV of plus 12. We mentioned that only half of the variation will go to the calf, as the relationship is only 50%. So the cow will contribute plus 2, the bull will contribute plus 6. So we expect that the calves, on average from this specific mating, will be about plus 8. So now we get to EBVs and how they are displayed on Internet Solutions. So Internet Solutions is the web where we can look up the EBVs of our animals. You will see there's a range of traits that BreedPlan calculates EBVs for, and it differs slightly between the different breeds. And this is simply due to the availability of performance information. So if your breed has enough information on a specific trait, BreedPlan can analyze it. So I'm just going to highlight the different portions and how to understand these. So this is the animal's EBVs for the different traits. As was mentioned before, you will see it is expressed in the or the unit in which it is weighed or measured. Then we have the breed average. So for this year, the breed average is for 2023 born calves. The reason for that is these calves are now old enough to be measured for most of the traits, and they are also the animals that are or will be on sale mostly this year. So the next piece of information that we can find here is the traits analyzed. So for this one, or this animal, he was weighed for birth weight, 600-day weight, and he also has a SNP profile that was included in the analysis. So it shows you for which traits this specific animal has measurements itself and was actually included in the analysis. Then we get to the statistics, number of herds. So this bull was used in 3 herds. Number of progeny analyzed. So these are progeny with performance data included in the EBV calculations. And then number of daughters. This is the number of daughters with progeny analyzed. So it gives you a bit more information on this animal and his EBVs. Then what we can see here is that one of the traits are highlighted in blue, or one of the EBVs. So for this trait for 200-day weight, this animal is a trait leader. And there's different criteria for the different traits, but most of the time the animal is about in the top 10% of the breed for the specific trait. Then you will see that for some of the traits, this animal does not have EBVs displayed. And this is simply due to the fact that the accuracy of these EBVs are too low, and BreedPlan do not feel comfortable to report on them. It is also trait specific and breed specific, but normally it's about a cutoff point of 20%. So below 20% accurate, they do not display the specific EBV. So how do we interpret EBVs? EBVs can be interpreted in 2 ways. The one is an individual animal's EBV versus the breed average. Secondly, we can see where an animal ranks within the population. And thirdly, we can look at how 2 animals' EBVs compare to one another. So in the first case, if we look at how the animal's EBV compare to the breed average, in this case, 23 is his EBV, the breed average is 16. So the difference is 7 kilograms. What does this mean? It means that the bull is 7 kilograms genetically heavier at 200-day weight compared to the average genetic level of the current population. In the second instance, where does this specific animal rank within the breed? We can look at the percentile bands and see where the specific animal ranks. At 23 kilograms, he is in the top 10% of the breed. For 400-day weight, he has an EBV of 28 kilograms, and that is in the top 40% of the breed for 400-day weight. In the third instance, we can look at how an animal's EBV compare to another animal's EBV. So in this case, 23 compared to 9. This is a difference of 14 kilogram. We mentioned that only half is passed on to the offspring. So we divide that by 2. So we get to a difference of 7. So on average, more or less 100 progeny, bull 1 will produce offspring that will weigh 7 kilograms heavier at weaning than bull 2. So what does that mean for you as a cattle breeder? So if you use bull 1 rather than bull 2, your calves will on average weigh 7 kilograms heavier at weaning. If you sell your weaners and a bull has about 150 calves in a span of 4 to 5 years, and the average weaner price we took at 34 kilograms, that is 35,000 Rand more income for your farming enterprise if you use bull 1 rather than bull 2. Then lastly, I'm going to look at EBV accuracies. They are displayed here below the EBVs. You will see it range from as low as something in the 20s, and it can go up to 99%. The higher the accuracy, you know more information went into the calculation. The higher the accuracy, the more likely the EBV is to predict the animal's true breeding value, and the less chances there will be that the EBV will change as you add more information. Interpreting the EBV accuracies, 0 to 40% is still very low. It could change substantially. 41 to 65 is still low, but you know that the animal's own performance was at least incorporated. And then we move all the way up. When you get to above 90, 95%, it's very high, and the animal's EBV is fairly reliable. So in conclusion, EBVs or genomically enhanced EBVs are the only way to select animals based on their genetic merit. Accurate performance records are needed for EBVs to be calculated. The performance of an individual animal's EBV is only directly compared to the animals within their contemporary groups. The higher the heritability of the trait, the faster the genetic progress that can be made. Okay, thank you. With this, I will conclude, and we'll take the questions afterwards. And I will hand over to Kobus.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me, if I can just get an indication.
Coming through loud and clear. Thank you, Kobus.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mario. Izaan, thank you very much for the presentation that you've just presented. I think it's important that we understand and that we remind ourselves where does the information come from that we base our decisions on. And often the source of information is quite crucial and of high value and importance. Therefore, critically important that whenever you acquire animals, you acquire them from trusted breeders. So that just for a small little intro. Let's go to the formal stuff. Izaan, I just want to make sure I can share. I think I can share.
Should be able to.
Good. And then I want to get into presentation mode. I hope it went over to presentation mode. Can I just get feedback there? Do you see the whole thing? One slide?
No, it's not in presentation. I can see all the slides.
Let's try again.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. And okay, EBVs as tool for the beef producer. That is what I hope I understood correctly as being the topic of tonight's discussion. Thank you for everyone that has joined tonight, and hopefully I will be able to add some value to your beef business, your beef operation. So it is important that we understand what tools do we have available that can aid us in being sustainable and to be profitable, sustainable over time. That is crucially important. Before you can use any tool, whether it's a grinder, a shifting spanner, a pipe wrench, doesn't matter. It's important that you understand what are the tools that are available, and then also what it is that I would like to achieve with utilizing or by utilizing that specific tool or that specific piece of equipment. Izaan has just showed us a number of very important things. First of all, as to how to determine what goes into getting to or determining or calculating an EBV, and then the accuracy, how that gets influenced by the number of information of the animal itself. We know that progeny information plays a crucial role, the value and the importance of the contemporary group and everything that goes with that. That's very technical. But now let's say all of that has been done, because that is the beauty of dealing with breed plan and within the LRF breeds. We've got a lot of information that's already populated and presented in a very useful manner. But first of all, you need to understand what are your breeding goals. You need to determine specifically your breeding goals. You need to take stock in terms of where am I within my herd, and then what would I like to improve? What is of importance for my farming or beef operation to remain sustainable? Critically important that you understand whatever you do. Let's say I'm going to focus a little bit more. My mindset will be set round about getting a new bull or a new herd sire. And we know that the herd sire, because of his contribution towards your herd, is an absolute driver of genetic progress. But never ever neglect reproduction. Reproduction is something that you should keep in mind all the time. It's important that you understand the antagonists within the system. Now, what do I mean by that? Often you will hear that a breeder will ask or will inform you, listen, I want to up my milk. Milk is important. That gives me weight, and weight is something that will definitely contribute towards my turnover. And I also would like to make sure that my reproduction is at its peak. Now, milk and reproduction, for example, are antagonists of each other. In other words, an animal that's producing excessive or a huge amount of milk without necessarily the optimum amount of feed available to do so will struggle to reconceive. Why is that? Because if you select for milk, you select for a specific trait that is antagonistic towards reproduction. So it's important that you understand that we've got these tools, and if you use the hammer instead of the set of pliers, the one is going to work against the other. And important that you understand that. Breeding for turnover of profit is a concept that's coming more and more to the foreground, and it is important that you understand what do we mean by that. If we look at breeding for turnover, it would be your weight traits. Weight gives you turnover. It's nice to sell heavy weaner calves, or when you're in the steer production system, oxen system, to sell heavy oxen. But what did they eat? What did they have to utilize to turn grass into higher turnover? And important that you make sure you understand the concept of I'm chasing after profit and not just after turnover. and that you're very clear about that. All part of achieving or determining your breeding goals. When you put your goals together and you decide what is important, what is it that I really would like to achieve, make sure that it's got a limited number. If you try and aim at the moon, the sun, and the stars, you're going to make a stuff up of it. Make sure that you limit the number. Rather, make sure that you understand what it is that you would like to achieve or accomplish within your herd, within your breeding policy, and then follow a more focused approach. And please be sure that you are able to measure progress. Now, often it's difficult to really measure progress because no two seasons are the same. But it's important that you understand you have to build in some way whereby you can really see whether you've made some good progress over time. And when in doubt, make sure that you speak to the right people, make sure that you get access to the right information and talk to people who can really help you with that. You should decide whether you would like to follow a shotgun approach where you want to pull the trigger once and hit a lot of targets, or whether you prefer the more scoped rifle approach. And here I'm basically referring to making use of index values, whereby by selecting for one index value, that becomes like your shotgun, whereby you can achieve a lot of other things by looking at one specific value rather than trying to get things right, for example, by looking at birth weight and just addressing birth weight, things like that. So it's important that you understand what you're busy with and what would be the best tool available in your arsenal to achieve exactly that. Now, on the screen, I hope you can see now some data, some EBVs. But the first thing I would like to point you to is looking at the completeness of performance star rating of this specific breeder. I can say it, this is the chairperson of the LRF, Mr. Johan Steiger's herd, and you'll see that he's got a 5-star completeness of performance. Now, what that tells you is you have got a high probability that the EBVs as presented on his animals will turn out to be what it says. As you can see in the column there where it shows the accuracy of the EBVs, fairly high, not fairly high. Some EBVs, let's look at birth weight, for example, 89%, 84%, 85% for the weight traits. Very accurate EBVs as presented there. And as Izaan has also pointed out to you, look at the amount of traits analyzed. So important that when you look at the EBVs that you understand how reliable and how useful will these EBVs be in terms of the source. And the way that you determine that is you have a look at where does it come from and that breeder's completeness of performance record. So important that you're just aware of that. Then have a good understanding of what it is you would like to achieve. Be able to interpret these EBVs quite correct. So crucially important that you understand what it is that you would like to achieve. Now, Izaan has pointed out, for example, to us in one of the previous slides that she shared with you, some so-called trait leaders, animals with EBVs that are in the top 10% of the breed, for example. Now, important that you understand what it is, what you look at. That is not always good to select just for the top 10% or the so-called trait leaders. Why is that? If you're conscious about profitability rather than turnover, you would understand that it's better to have an animal with a 400-day growth or 400-day EBV that is closer to the average of the group or average of the breed, not the group. The reason for that is so that you know I'm not going to make my animals too big. Being too big, growing too fast is not always the ideal. It's important that you understand where does what come from. Also very important, whenever you compare data, you will see on the screen that the slide we're looking at is for data of the data run of January 2025. Make sure that you always compare the correct data run with each other when comparing animals. Often I have people contacting me and say that, I acquired these bulls, I still have the data as it was when I bought them 2 years back and 3 years back. And then I asked them, okay, but did you realize that you cannot compare different runs over time? You cannot compare a data run of March 2021 to a data run of January 2025, for example. So important that you make that link, that you understand that. Otherwise, you're really going to end up with some more troubles. Now, one of the things that we need to understand and actually take cognizance of is the fact that in Southern African conditions, where we would like to produce animals suitable for our market. Now, what do I mean by our market? Our market prefers a lean animal. A lean animal is an animal that's got fat cover that is not too much, not excessive, but very important. We know that fat, especially outer body fat, plays a major role in fertility, reproduction of the animal. Now, we've got two things. Once again, look at the antagonist. We say we want lean meat, but we don't want meat that's got no fat cover. We need some fat cover. We need to be able to get to animals with a 2 millimeter even layered fat cover throughout the whole body. Now, what's happening at the moment is what was pointed out very clearly last week. Abattoirs penalizing breeders for delivering carcasses heavier than 340 kilograms because of the weight problem. But in the feedlot, we have the situation whereby we know that before we can slaughter the animals, they must have the correct fat cover, and it takes time within certain breeds. Now, if we look at what we have here, it's quite clear to see that this specific animal has got minus 0.6 for rib fat, minus 0.7 for rump fat. So excellent growth, absolutely some of the best that you can get. But look at what's happening now in terms of rib and rump fat running low. So we can know already that when looking at, or just by looking at the EBVs, when we use a bull like this, we would like to slaughter his offspring later on. I'm going to have to put more millies to round it off or to finish it off. Therefore, if I don't have the millies, I know that his offspring I should sell or consider selling maybe closer to a 400 day, or after I did some long weaning on it, and then to sell it off. Let the feedlot who specializes in converting millies to fat, let them take care of that. Izaan has pointed out for you the number of herds, the progeny analyzed, how that works. I'm not going to stand still with that. But then remember what I said about the shotgun approach, when you want to hit with one pull of the trigger, a number of targets. For that, we've got the index values. Within Simmentaler, they've got the Simmentaler breeder index as well as the Simmentaler profit index. Always important that you understand, you compare your EBVs or an index value to the breed average. Crucially important that you understand that. And then as far as your single trait EBVs are concerned, always look at the accuracy of that. Now, within the selection indexes, we don't have accuracies reflected, but important that you understand, what does it mean when we talk about Simmentaler breeder index or profit index? Before I go there, Izaan has pointed out the percentile table, that it's important that you are aware of it. And by clicking on one of the EBVs, when you go onto the system to the data, just in front of the graph of the previous graph, this graph that I showed you, just above it on the Internet Solutions, you will have access to some other graphs. When you click on that, this one here is one of the graphs that you can get. What this graph tells us is for each trait, there's a bandwidth. Let's look at the example at milk. It will give you the average. There's the average right in the middle, +5 for milk. This animal is on +4, which is slightly on the lower side. But statistically, this EBV can change within that band. That is determined by, or influenced hugely or mainly by the accuracy of the EBV. So if you look at an animal's data and it's got a very narrow band over here in this area, then you know, well, I can rely on this data. It's important that you understand that. It's important also that you understand what is the value of that minus 3.8 in gestation length. It means that this sire, he passes on the ability to his calves to be born 3.8, let's say 3 days, just over 3 days earlier than the rest of the herd or the other sires that you've used. He only passes on half of it, but what does it really mean? What it means is that if he sired 30 calves within a season, being born, let's say on average 1.5 days earlier, it means effectively 30 times 1.5, I have 45 days extra that I can utilize at the end of my weaning season. That extra day and a half that those calves were born earlier, I can add value to them. And if they gain, let's say on average 1 kilogram per day, it means that just by selecting for the right traits, I already have a benefit. And the benefit in this case, besides the weight benefit that we have when we look at the 200-day weight, there's another benefit. And it's important that you understand each of these values means something and has got some value that you should consider. This is just another way to look at the percentile table, where the animal lies, where that specific animal lies. I don't want to stand still too long on that. I'm thinking we're running out of time. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Here it gives you an indication, also one of those graphs that you can click on, what you can expect, where does that animal fit in terms of the actual value. All of this is available on the web, but important that you understand, that you interpret what you have available and how that will be incorporated within your farming practices. Like I said, something that we as Southern Africans should work on, for example, is our fat cover. Let's understand what it is, what we're looking at. A different set of EBVs, make sure you understand what it entails, how it works, and so forth. Then I would like to get to the Simmentaler Breeder Index. I just would like to quickly touch on that. And it's important that you understand, what does it mean? What does it stand for? Now, when we look at the Breeder Index, it says, commercial self-replacing Simmentaler herd targeting the sale of yearlings. So we're not focusing on weaners, we're talking about yearlings. Heifers are retained, so maternal traits are important. Steers and surplus heifers are to be finished in a feedlot for a period of 160 to 180 days. And then as target weight, you've got steers and surplus heifers. You would like them to achieve a target weight of 480 to 555 kilograms live weight. They should dress out easily around 60% of that weight, and that you would like to achieve at 13 to 14 months of age. And then it gives you an indication of how does it work, what is the emphasis on, how much does the different EBV traits contribute towards that index. So we can see there, like I said, maternal traits important. Calving is direct, 13% included. Calving is maternal, 5% included. Birth weight, 1%. Focus on that. We would like them to be, there's a -1, we would like them to be slightly lighter. Milk, we want to make sure we don't go too heavy on the milk, therefore on that side. And it's important that you have a look at what is playing a role here. A lot of emphasis on days to calving, our gold standard in terms of reproduction and fertility traits within the breed plan breeds. The only grouping within South Africa, the LRF breeds, able to give you this very, very important information and useful information that will aid you in establishing a more fertile reproductive herd. Scrotal circumference, we know about the value of that, not the challenge within the Simmentaler breed. Therefore, they can be on that side. Fat depth, 4% emphasis on fat depth. They know, or they feel that they are okay in terms of build and conformation. Not too much emphasis on the eye muscle area, but important. Beef retail beef yield, crucially important. Intermuscular fat, something we need to address within most of our breeds within South Africa. So important that you understand that when looking at the index value, it's a specific thing that you can achieve by doing that. And a lot of things have been combined to assist you in getting to the right answer. The other trait that they've got that they find useful or that they give us information on, like I said, we've got the Simmental, the breeder index, as well as in the profit index. And you need to have a look at the index value itself, compare it to the breed average, and that will give you an indication as to whether you're buying or acquiring a more superior animal or not. The next one, commercial self-replacing herd targeting the sale of yearlings again, bulls used over Bos Indicus cross cow. So here we're looking at if you've got a Bos Indicus cross cow herd, for example, we know that the Simmental will complement that kind of breed or that kind of cows to a huge extent. Then this is what you can expect if you go about in that way. So if that is part of your beef operating system or operation, these are the things that they place emphasis on. Still, calving is very important. That's covered there in the top two. Fertility, very important. That's covered there. Emphasis on 400-day growth, around about 16% emphasis placed there. And then the other things of importance, like I've said, here a little bit emphasize, a little bit attention going to eye muscle area. Fat, always important, especially in the economy where we are now. So important that you understand that. Here's another example as what you can, type of EBVs you can get. Like I've already given you that little bit of a warning. Be cautious of just going for the blue blocks where you have these high values or trade leaders. It's not always sensible or advisable to be in a trade leader position. Important, please, guys, understand what it is, what you're looking at. Understand how to interpret the EBVs. Understand that you need to set up for yourself specific goals. How would you like to improve on those goals? Is there something you can measure? From there, you go and have a look at what EBVs are available within the breed that you're looking at. Understand the importance of the accuracy of that EBV. That will give you the usefulness. An EBV has only got value once it's been compared to the average of the breed. Important prior to doing all of this that you acquire your animals from breeders who are reputable. In this case, traits analyzed for within this animal was gestation length, calving is birth weight. Those three weights, growth weights recorded, scrotal circumference, and we can see that this animal has been scanned for carcass traits. So a lot of information here. Make sure that you make yourself aware of what is available, how does it work, and then if you would like to go the more shotgun approach and look at a more holistic approach, make sure that you understand each breed, because they differ from breed to breed, what indexes are available and what goes into those indexes as I have just explained to you. Only then it will be useful.